My name is Kara Capone. I work here at the Council of the Americas. I'm part of the Women's Hemispheric Network team, and it is my pleasure to invite our panelists for the first panel up here on the stage. And as they're joining me, I'll give a brief overview of today's conference. So at the conclusion of this panel, we will ask for everyone to leave the Bolivar and dining rooms and to go back into where the breakfast was served. We have to allow our team to flip the room and prepare for lunch. That'll be a coffee networking session. We'll have something to eat, of course. Feel free to leave your belongings at your table. If you can leave them on your chair, that'd be greatly appreciated. After the coffee, we'll reconvene in here for the second panel before transitioning immediately to the table leader session over lunch. So at this time, I would like to welcome Professor Maha, sociologist and confidence researcher at McMaster University, Smar Maziad, vice president and senior analyst at Moody's, Arpi Mazumdar, vice president and chief operating officer of U.S. regional sales at Goldman Sachs, Gabriela Sculodi. Oh, I did it wrong. We even practiced. All right. Apologies. She is the partner and co-head of McKinsey's corporate investment banking practice. And of course, our moderator is Chris Michel, head of diversity and inclusion for the Americas at Bloomberg. A reminder that this panel is on the record and being webcast live. And with that, I pass it over to Chris. Welcome.
Everybody switched on, I hope? Okay, we're good. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our panel on making the ask and closing the gender gap. We have four very accomplished women here with us, and I hope you take the time to read their bios this morning after we've broken here for a break. So, to provide some context, obviously we heard some great remarks just a moment ago from Marian Salzman. But we wanted to provide a little bit of context, and these statistics were given to us by some of our panelists today from research that's been done both at Goldman Sachs and at McKinsey. So, women from the ages of 25 to 54 years old in the U.S. Are paid 20% less than men. That is even bigger for Latina and Black women at 53% and 61% respectively. Globally, women make 47% of what men make. Women make up 40% of employees in the S&P 1500 companies, but only 6% of CEOs. At the current rate, U.S. women will not reach pay equity until the year 2106, which I don't think any of us will be here at that point in time. And in no country in the world do women make as much as men. And so clearly, there is a gender gap, and it is huge. And so against that backdrop, we'll have our panel today, and I'll start with the professor. Your website refers to you as an apology hater and confidence builder. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about self-perceptions of value and how they play into this conversation, not being able to ask for what you want. And do you see this being more acute specifically for women?
Thank you. Hi, everybody. So I am a sociologist, and I study women's confidence, and I am obsessed with apologies. And it started about 4 years ago. I attended an academic conference with a panel, not unlike this one, and it was all women at the pinnacle of their career. And all they had to do was introduce themselves. And one by one, they started with, "Oh my gosh, I don't know what I could possibly add to such a distinguished panel." And I was like, "What? Oh my gosh, make it stop. She's the world expert in this field. Why is she minimizing her contributions?" We have a term for that in sociology. It's called feminine modesty. The tendency to minimize your accomplishments, to deflect praise. And everywhere at that panel and every conference that I attended, I heard an apologetic tone. "Sorry, can I just interrupt? Sorry, is this a good time? Sorry, could I jump in here? Sorry." And what I realized in that moment was this overuse of apologies that was reflected with women at the pinnacle of their career mirrored exactly what I was seeing in my undergraduate classrooms. Apologies matter. And if you are beginning and ending your sentences with sorry, is this a good time? Sorry, could I just disagree? don't be surprised if there's nothing left of your confidence at the end of the day. Because with every unnecessary apology we give out, with every deflection of praise, oh, it wasn't just me, it was the team, I couldn't have done it, oh my gosh, little old me. With every deflection of praise and unnecessary apology we give, no one's looking at you going, damn, how can I get some of that confidence? How can I get her on my team? And there's a very gendered difference between how men use apologies, and what we know is men have a very high bar, a very high threshold for what they think is worthy enough for an apology. And the research shows that women are down here. We have such a low threshold for an apology. And that chips away at our confidence. Oh, I could talk about this for an hour. But it makes a difference. It makes a difference in how you view yourself, in whether you are strengthening the imposter syndrome within, and in how others perceive you. And the biggest thing we know about apologies and deflection of praise is it changes how others perceive you. And I want to bring attention to how often and for what reason we are apologizing and deflecting praise.
Thank you. Gabriella, you've had a very steep career climb at some of the world's most well-known professional services and financial services firms. The assumption, of course, is that your work product has been superb. But I would also assume that you've had to ask for things like sponsorship and mentorship. How have you made those asks, and was that easy or hard to do for you?
First of all, thank you for the kind words and no apology.
No apologies.
I will answer the question with a question. I want to ask, how many of you in the room know the difference between a sponsor and a mentor? Well, I didn't know the difference when I first started working. A mentor is someone who gives you advice. A sponsor is someone who proactively creates opportunities for you. An opportunity is not go and meet XYZ. Opportunity is we have this amazing project, and you, Haley, Maya, Gabriella, you're going to do this project. That's a sponsor. And that has made a huge difference in my career. And of course, no surprise, most of the sponsors that matter were men, white men. So it's white men that we need to change, and it's white men that we need to hold accountable and make them sponsors. Other people too, women as well. We have a little bit of a tendency to go to the senior women in the room, and I love it when women come to me, but let's not put that burden only on women. Let's put that burden out there on everyone.
Thank you. Samar, you were educated in institutions outside the United States. And I guess my question is, do you think that that experience had either a positive or negative influence on your being able to ask for what you want out of your career? So I guess, in other words, is this a problem that's not as bad, the same, or worse in other parts of the world?
Thank you, Michael. And, it's a great question. And it's something that I often think about because it's helpful to think of where you came from. And the way I put it usually is, it's a long way I grew up in Cairo. It's a long way from Cairo to New York. So, and I'd really say it's a long way from Cairo to Washington, D.C., because that's where I went first. But, and what I mean by that is you have to make a lot of things happen along the way. And I can relate to a lot of the, and maybe later in the conversation, to a lot of the points that you both raised. But what I would highlight is, so I had to convince a lot of people that I want to do a lot of things. And it's, I'm starting with telling my parents that I have to go and get an internship at the age of 20 in the US. And it's a different era, right? There was no internet, there was no cell phone, there was no texting, and you don't just let your child travel for the first time unattended like that, and I've never traveled by myself anywhere. But, I think that was the biggest, it's not that I wasn't asking for stuff before, but to my mind, I thought this would definitely not work. Like, no way I'm going to get this done. But they said yes, because there's sometimes things that may not fully about the person you're asking about. I'm talking about my parents here. So my dad values education. It's a good thing. I said I want to do this for a certain purpose, and it worked. I have to say it was not a big struggle. I mean, I had to ask. It's a lot more complicated to do other things. So that maybe was a very early, career-relevant experience, if you can call it that. They just, you just ask for stuff, and it may work, even if you think it won't. And that never stopped after that. But the interesting thing is, after graduate school, and you asked about being educated abroad, I went to the IMF. So that's where I got it. It was my dream job, and here we are. And what more can you do? It's just done now. But the first thing I know people actually told me, and it's a little bit about the sponsorship and the mentors, oh, you have to ask for, say, like if you want a good assignment, if you want a high-profile department to work with, you network, you go talk to people, and you say, this is what I want. And I was like, oh, really? You do that? Or you don't just sit and wait, your turn will come because you're new, and then the others will get ahead of you? And no, if you want to wait, you will be still waiting probably. So that was an eye-opener, but in terms of, cultural and corporate cultures also are more specific, but to me, this is not what you do necessarily. Like I would not, and it's different between asking for help and asking for opportunity. So it's relatively easy early on in your career to ask for help. I want to improve my skills in this and that. But later on, or when I want this opportunity and I am more competitive for it and I think I should get it, is a lot different and a lot harder. And it honestly did not come naturally to me. Somebody had to tell me that this is what you do. So those are a couple of points about asking.
I want to add one fact from the McKinsey and Lean survey, which, by the way, went public 2 days ago, a day and a half ago at the Wall Street Journal. So I encourage you all to read it. I want to share a fact because it's a very important fact. Women drop off the funnel very early on. So we are fortunate, at least like in the Fortune 1000 companies that we survey, around 300 companies, 60,000 people, and we get data for about 15 million employees. We have managed in the US to have some sort of parity at the entry level. Right now, most companies have almost 50-50 female and male entrants. And that's in finance, in insurance, in many industries. The problem becomes more acute in the first 2 years and in the first informal promotion. And it goes to the point of ask for things. So when we start, it's roughly 52 men, 48 women. By the first informal promotion, and I'll describe what that is, women drop by 12%. It's not even a title promotion yet. It's completely informal. And I'll talk about my industry. I used to be at Goldman as well with RP before in sales and trading. It's the co-cover with a senior guy, typically is a guy, the best client of the desk. Get the best trading book. Go to this cool investment banking meeting. Go to DC and present. Go with Marion at the wrong place to have a client meeting. These kind of things. So it's very important that in the beginning of the funnel, you're actually, I'm gonna say the non-kosher word, aggressive, to get these opportunities, to get these sponsors, because that's where a gap starts, before you're named an associate after a business analyst.
Arpita, let's jump you in here. So you've been in financial services for over 15 years, which is notorious, as we all know, for being kind of the old boys club. What have you, within that context, what have you had to ask for that allowed you to get to where you are today?
Thanks, Chris. So the short answer is pretty much everything. And I mean, everyone over here already alluded to a lot of the things like sponsorship, mentorship. I think it's important to, like establish yourself as being credible. Like you obviously have to do a good job at what you're doing. That's first and foremost. But once you sort of set that standard, I think it's important to put your hand up and ask for things, specifically as a woman being in financial services, which again, to your point, is an old boys club, right? So, I mean, to Gabriella's point, what she just mentioned, you have to ask for things that are outside just your mandate, whether it, be in your career or whether it's even comp expectations. I've personally had those conversations, like, here's, you have to do a little bit of research, like, here's where I think my peers are, and I think this is what I should be making. Men do it all the time, specifically in financial services, all the time. Women tend to shy back from those conversations. And I think it's important. I mean, the worst thing that's gonna happen is someone's gonna say no to you, but it's better to ask than not to ask.
And what's the most difficult part of asking for what you want?
I think the most difficult part of asking is, like, you have to be a little vulnerable. In order to make an effective ask, you have to be, I call it the 3 C's. You have to be clear, you have to be confident, and you have to be consistent. Without those, I think your ask sort of becomes muffled, right? Like, you can be passive in your ask, but it's hard to put yourself to make those 3 C's. You have to practice and be clear in how you're asking that question and being vulnerable.
And so, Summer, I'll throw this to you. When the answer is no, how do you regroup and move forward?
Yeah, which happens all the time. So, honestly, it's, apart from the first moment of being, frustrated and this didn't work out the way I hoped, of course, you're prepared also for that answer. So you go in and it's not shock. I mean, sometimes it is, but, because you think you have asked this before and we have established it, but it turns out not to be the case. But after the disappointment, I like to start putting myself in a different mind frame. And this is where the fun begins. And I'm going to make this work. And there are many ways to do that. Because you see at the situation, it becomes more about you, not about what you're asking for. You try, at least in my head, turn it around that this is about what I want to do about this now, rather than what others will not do. I know they will not do this, at least for now. It's okay, what else can I do? So it becomes, more of a, not entirely a personal challenge, but then you can, the obvious thing, you ask yourself, what can I do differently? Maybe I missed something, maybe it's not the right time, but you go through all of this list. I'm being honest here, that you have done all your due diligence and still the answer is no, and maybe unreasonably, right? And this is I think, is the point. What else can I do? And then you start looking at what do I really want out of this? And often it's not what you specifically ask for, but what you're after is recognition, growth, sort of responsibility. It's what comes with what you asked for. And then this you can achieve in different ways. You can find other tasks that you would ask for that you turn into a bigger opportunity for yourself. Then maybe, yes, because they cannot say no to everything. They said no to this one, so they'll give you, okay, then I will turn that into an opportunity. And even when you get into, let's say, criticism or negative feedback or whatever, okay, I will show responsibility and I will turn this into a problem-solving exercise. So it's the challenge is to stay in the positive mind frame. And it comes and goes, so don't be too hard on yourself. It's not like every day you will be there, but...
Any other thoughts on regrouping after no?
I can add some. So I think the best thing you can do is go and ask for feedback. Whether it's a no, whether it's something that went wrong. I will share an anecdote from our survey as well. We find that people have a hard time giving the real feedback to women, and I will play back what happened at one interview. Guy, girl, create a financial model. Both models suck, literally suck. And we pulled that from the reviews, basically, and we spoke to the manager. The manager calls the guy in and says, George, your model sucked. Your assumptions were wrong. You didn't think them through. They were not truly relevant to the sector. Go back and work on the assumptions and the thinking of how they link together. The girl comes in and he says, let me start by saying, great job.
It's like you're in kindergarten.
Yes. Great. No, it's like the fear of giving you the real feedback. And he says, that model was not exactly what we needed. It needed more work. It needed more work on the assumptions, the thinking around the sector. So that's my feedback. Think about it. What do you think the guy left the room and thought versus the girl? Take a stab.
Yeah.
The guy thought, I suck, I need to go and fix the assumptions and think them through. The girl left and thought, I need to work harder. I'm gonna be here until midnight. What a difference. The guy fixed his assumptions in 45 minutes by talking to people, doing a little bit more old-fashioned Googling. She stayed there all night. So please, go and ask the feedback and make people feel comfortable to give you the feedback.
Please.
I'll just jump in there also. It's because it's a very gendered way of handling failure. So when women fail, they make a mistake, they tend to think they are the mistake, right? And we fail at something, and we think we are a failure. And we need to start getting better at not ruminating and not dwelling and not overthinking every little tiny mistake. You go up to present something and it doesn't go well. It doesn't mean you're not a good public speaker. It means you need to work at your public speaking, not that you can't do it ever again. But that's something that is very gendered.
But also be aware of the bias out there. There's a very famous study done by Harvard at Citibank, which is very public. You can find it online, on a female and male trader. And I'm talking a lot about trading because that's what RP and I have been doing for a really long time. So they observed female traders and male traders, and they looked at two very senior people. The male, and that was done in the late 80s, so people still use like the big phones. The senior male trader, when he had a bad P&L day, he would be like really upset on his desk, like slamming the phone, breaking it. What do you think the woman did? Exactly, she cried on the desk. She was sitting there holding her head like this, thinking about the P&L, and like tears were just like falling off. She was not some crazy woman like hysterically crying, but you know. And they realized, then they talked to their supervisors and they realized that the supervisors perceived the woman as weak and the man as strong. I would have thought he's freaking crazy. He broke the phone. But so yes, take the feedback, be confident, but also be mindful of the bias that it's out there and like work around it.
But I really agree with being all the self-flagellating that women do. I mean, and also the expectation that you get a lot more pushback from people, even when you say something was not done right, and you know, when you give feedback to others, you get a lot of pushback. Then it's your responsibility to fix it in a way. It's very complicated. I don't think you get the same response or the same expectations, even when you give feedback. But I get your point completely that you do not get the right feedback necessarily when you are a woman because it's not exact and it's not direct.
So to that point, I think it's also important for to have a manager effectiveness training. Like you should not be going in and giving, to Gabriella's point, like a woman a different kind of feedback than a male. You just should not be doing that. You should just be direct at all times. And I know it's hard, but that's why these trainings
I will
are
tell you
important.
though what is my trick with feedback, which I learned at McKinsey, not at Goldman. Goldman is a very aggressive culture and we're not very comfortable with these things. So I learned that at McKinsey, which I think has completely changed my trajectory at the firm. And I learned that from a man, actually. So he said to me, Gabriella, when you go and ask for feedback or you receive feedback, one, don't be defensive, which is like, big no-no. Two, don't be aggressive, which is even worse. Try to engage the person who gives you the feedback for the two of you to co-own the solution of the feedback. So they become invested in your career, and it's not just they give you feedback to highlight something wrong. It's actually now you have the power to turn it, you gave me feedback to succeed. And you know what? I want you to be part of my success. And I have yet to meet a person that I told them, I want you to be part of my success, and they told me no.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. Like, I think the words you choose matter. And like, again, it goes back to the point that I made earlier of being a little vulnerable. So if you actually engage the person, if you identify what your need is, identify the ask, make it clear, and then make the ask, it makes a big difference as opposed to being passive. So if you kind of say, I've noticed that XYZ seems to be off. Do you feel the same way? Would you be willing to have this conversation with me? That person just automatically feels engaged in having that conversation with
So
you.
to that end, what should women be asking for? Is it salary? Is it promotion? Is it assignments? What should you be asking for as you're having these conversations?
I will start. I think you should ask whatever is appropriate, and I will share one more anecdote. So at Goldman, we were very comfortable asking for comp because comp was the way to measure your success. So it was very much okay to do that. When I moved to McKinsey, that's not allowed. It's not part of the norms. So I got paid that one cycle, and the global head of the practice talked to me about this, and I said to him, shit, like, I don't know what to do with this thing that you gave me. I honestly, don't understand the balance sheet. I didn't want to say the comp. I was like, I don't understand the balance sheet. I think, I shocked the hell out of him. The next day, HR called me and said, hey, you're super high achieving, so we thought we should prepay you the bonus of the year. And I was like, what? They're like, well, next year, if you want, we can prepay the bonus. And I was like, I don't understand. Where is this coming from? We really believe in you and we think you're going to achieve so much. And I was like, can you please cut this BS and like tell me what I did wrong? They're like, well, you told us something about a balance sheet. And I was like, oh my God, what a disaster. So I spoke about comp in a place that doesn't talk about comp. At McKinsey, we measure ourselves with client impact. So make sure what you ask actually makes sense and it's part of the norms. I was new at McKinsey, so I think I was forgiven, but they still talk in HR about like that story that made them think that I have some major financial need to pay my kids' school and they had to pre-fund me.
Know your culture, absolutely. So how, right? Let's be tactical here. How do you ask for what you want? It's clear we need to ask, right? Women need to ask, but how? How do you do it?
I think Arpita started with being clear and persistent. I would maybe emphasize, also the persistence, because you will not get yes from the beginning necessarily, but you will definitely get yes about something. So you just have to be strategic and find what is right for you, even if you are denied first. But the thing about how is you have to read your environment also. Sometimes you ask for things, or you ask for what you think is right, not in the right way, because you come across as too aggressive, or too soon, or too presumptuous. And I think women are often, victims of those a lot more than men. So even though you may be in the right to ask for something, maybe, some humility and waiting and all of that doesn't necessarily right, but if you want to get to something, you may have to change tactics.
I also think it's important, besides the how, it's who you're asking. I think the who is very important. Like, you have to know who the right players are to make the right question. You have to, again, it goes back to my earlier point that I made, you have to establish the credibility, know the audience, and ask the right person. It's also about giving and getting, right? It goes back to that credibility. So if you have to, and Gabriella mentioned this a little bit, so it's give or take. Like, if you're able to provide something, the other person's just vested, but you need to know your audience. I think that's important.
I think the secret is to ask in a way that they will not say no. And I find that a lot of times the way to ask is to make it about a common goal. It can be something like, instead of going and saying, I want to work with that client because I'm the best at this and you should not have XYZ do it, I think you can go and say, hey, had a little bit of time and I spent it thinking about that client. With that client this year we did 3 things, but I think we can actually do 7. There's so much more we can do, and it's 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, ABC. I would love it if I had the opportunity to lead things 5 and 6 for the team. I think when you make it about a common goal, and also what it does for the team, for the person you are making the ask to, I think it makes a big difference.
That way will work if in some situations, but if you're asking something specifically for you, yes, you can make it about the team, but you also have to realize and be realistic, you're competing with others. So you're not just the only one going and saying, I want to work on this necessarily. So it can be complicated, I'm sure you would agree, right?
I agree, I still think the frame of what can be done is an easier frame. I do agree that you need to fight versus the next person, but then I'll go back to what I said before. If you don't get it and the next person gets it, then you go and ask for the feedback. That has been my strategy.
I think before you are ready to ask somebody else, you have to ask yourself. And getting to that point for me, that actress Mindy Kaling, the Mindy Project and all this. So she wrote a book called Why Not Me? And whenever I'm about to make an ask, I think about that. Why not me? Oftentimes, because we internalize failure and mistake and we deal with perfectionism, which is paralysis, we often reframe that thinking to, why would they listen to me? Am I good enough? Am I smart enough? Can I do this? And I often reframe it to, why not me? Why the hell not me? Why shouldn't I go for that? Why shouldn't I ask for that? Why shouldn't I achieve that? Why shouldn't I break up with that guy? Why shouldn't I start my own business? Why shouldn't I learn a new language, go to a new country? Why not me? And that's always at the back of my mind. And then the second thing that's always at the back of my mind before I make that ask is Canadian data that came out from a corporation called Informed Opinions. And it looked at the gender disparity in Canadian media and found that 71% of the voices quoted in Canadian media, op-ed pieces, letters to the editors, experts on panels on television, 71% of those quoted in Canadian media are men. Where are the women? Where are the women? Luckily, they did a follow-up study, and the women said, I'm not enough of an expert. What if I say the wrong thing? And that's where that perfectionism comes in from. That's where I made one mistake, now I'm gonna ruminate, I'm gonna tell everyone I know, and then we're gonna talk more about it, I'm gonna drink a little bit of wine, we're gonna go out for dinner, I'm gonna talk more about it, I'm gonna feel like crap, and then I'm gonna be in the fetal position eating Haagen-Dazs later on tonight, right? Because that's what we do. So I think all of this is so important, but that very first step, before you even know who you're gonna ask, it's like, you've gotta have that internal resolve.
I mean, I totally agree with you, but that's fine. But sometimes I think, well, you have, the studies you showed are not lying, right? There are numbers out there. So actually, you do not get the same positive response when you are more assertive as men do. Yes. So you have to be careful. I mean, that's why I'm saying it happens.
Yeah.
It's like people think you're not entitled to ask for that.
Yeah.
And so even if you don't believe it, sometimes that backfires.
Absolutely, and then that gets you into all the gender bias research out there. But also, it doesn't just come from men, right? The gender bias also comes from other women, and every single one of us knows it because we've all had the pushback from another woman, right? And so I'm doing a confidence study right now, and it's one of the questions I ask. When you own it, when you say thank you, when somebody commends you for a job well done, and you don't immediately thank the team, you say, thank you, I did that. Well, have you ever received backlash? And every woman's like, oh my gosh, do you have 15 minutes? Let me tell you about the backlash that I have received. Because when you think of what a confident woman sounds like, or what a confident person sounds like, immediately what comes to mind is a white guy, right? And so when a confident woman does take the stage and ask for what she wants, unfortunately, there is pushback, and it comes from both men and women. And so we need to change that perception. When another woman is out there going for it, hustling, taking credit for it, instead of us saying, whoa, that's a little too much. Where does she think she's going with all of that confidence? We need to say, damn, how can I get to know her? How can I go and take her out for coffee? How can I learn from her? How can I get a little bit more of that chutzpah, right?
And look, we're not Pollyannas, right? So if you ask for things and you don't get them, you work at the wrong place. Your manager is the wrong manager. Yeah. A lot of times, the number one other fact, not McKinsey study. What do you think is the number one reason that young associates leave investment banking?
Culture, they're burnt out.
They hate their manager. It's their manager. Your manager is like the stepping stone to the big opportunity, to the next thing. If you're somewhere where you don't feel appreciated by your manager, if you ask for the opportunities, you ask for the feedback, you are aggressive, you're passive, you're everything, don't be Pollyanna. Just pack up and leave.
So let's just pivot quickly kind of on that last comment. No, this is great. You should see I'm shutting up and letting you... I do want to pivot, though, and kind of touch on that last comment. So what are some asks that you all made early in your careers that were kind of key to moving you in a trajectory that you wanted to be in? Any of you?
I wanna share something that it's not early on in my career, but it was at a big moment in my career. So at McKinsey, I was up for a really big promotion. I wanted to be the head of the corporate investment banking practice. And I was pregnant. I was 4 months pregnant with my second child. No one knew. I was hiding it. And then people figured it out, clearly. And a couple of people that I really loved, and a couple of people that I didn't love so much, and they didn't love me either, came to me and said, "Oh, wow, you're pregnant, second child, like, so tough. Is this year gonna be a little bit like slower for you?" And I went crazy. I literally went crazy. So what I did, I went and called every senior man in investment banking and said, "Men, friends, colleagues, there's something really wrong here. I'm having this great year." And that's the feedback I got from people that I love. Is there a perception going around that I'm gonna slow down? And I have to say, and I love McKinsey, I love being at McKinsey, within 8 days, every single senior partner in banking, including retail banking that I don't know anything about, called me and said, "Gabriela, we've got your back."
Any other kind of key asks early on in careers that you'd care to let us know about?
I think in general, it's you ask for something that you think is a little bit more challenging than what people expect you to do. Early on, that helps, and specifically, and that's, I mean, it has a lot of. It's an interesting story because it all says a lot about how we deal with women. I had very good luck with women. Managers on my career, but it's not necessarily the case. I'm completely, but in that particular instance, I was moving and after a couple of years, was it 2 or 3 years at the fund, and then I wanted to go from one team to another, much more higher profile, a lot policy and political and very high visibility. And I had worked with the manager who runs it briefly, like tangentially like that. And then afterwards she said, "Oh, I have an opening, I want you to come." And I was very happy because this is, in terms of visibility and opportunity, that's great. One of the other women that worked with her, and that was, funny, she kind of seeked me out and kind of took me in a corner and said, "Don't go there. She's terrible, she doesn't do this, it's too much work, she doesn't give credit," like all the horrible negative feedback you can imagine. It's like you're going to be, "Don't go there." And I was like, I don't think, yes, I understand I know she's not maybe the easiest person to deal with. You have people, people's reputations and frankly also competitive. I mean, she's pretty senior, and then not everybody likes her, so you hear lots of things. But then I said, no, but for me, it's a good opportunity. And I will get, at this level, a lot more visibility than I don't care if people like her or not, I will deal. We had a great working relationship, and specifically within 6 months, I went to her and said, it was an interesting topic, I liked it, and I said, "I want to lead the work on this paper." And this is not done by a junior person. This is done by a much more senior person, typically, or someone who's been at the organization longer. And I said, "I want to be the person putting it all together and doing it." She said, "Oh, fine." So at the end of 6 months, I was sitting at the IMF board, and I had only been there 3 years. This doesn't happen. To be part of the team that presents this. I mean, honestly, I did not expect that. But she said, "Oh, you can." I said, "Oh, I'm going to the board." I mean, this is like, that does not happen for anyone who is less than been at the IMF for 15 years. And I said, "Oh, wow, okay, I'll go and sit." So at least I happened once. So.
Great. So I'm being told to get to Q&A, but I do want to ask this one last question of the panel. Professor, why don't we start with you? Have you ever regretted making an ask, and why?
No. I think the way that you ask, the way that you get better asking is, I'm going to take it back to the confidence research, it is a skill that takes practice. Your first ask will be the most nerve-wracking, nerve-inducing, and then the second one a little less, but you get better by asking more. So confidence is a muscle. Confidence is a muscle that strengthens with use. It is not something that you are born with. It is something that is developed, and it is something that is learned. It is a myth. You hear this a lot. Fake it until you make it. There is no data to back that up. Don't listen to that. Fake it until you make it. No. What is confidence? Confidence is an action. You take action first. You feel confident second. Don't expect to feel confident in every single interaction you're going into. You have to flex the confident muscles. You have to flex the asking muscles, because if you don't, they will atrophy.
Anybody else want to jump in
I
on
only
that fast?
regret not asking, including like my own husband, like, you know.
And I agree with that because, I mean, if you don't ask the answers already, like it's a no. So you might as well ask.
Well, thank you. I know we wanted to save some time for questions in the audience, so by all means, if any of you have any, please have at it. Yes, in the back.
Hi, thank you all. I had a question about something that Gabriella touched on very early in the panel, which is that there's a tendency for women and potentially organizations to put a lot of the burden on senior women to help improve diversity and to mentor more junior women. As a senior woman, any advice on recruiting other partners in that effort to help have other people spread the word?
I go and scare the crap out of them. I do everything. I plea, I beg, I talk about their daughters, I embarrass them. I think there are like different strategies. I think you need to find a way to motivate people. There are facts though out there, and you should share them. You should share the McKinsey study. You should share the Goldman study. There's data out there on how diversity actually creates better, improving, performing teams. So you can do that as well. But I have no shame. I use all tactics, including crying.
And I do think being creative works. It makes you stand out. So.
Sorry,
good job,
the other thing
Gabriella.
to say is like, make a tangible ask. So like my new thing at McKinsey that I did, and I had no data, I went and said, hey, I observed that the highest performing senior project managers and junior partners in specific teams are men. How about if we ask these men in your team to mentor one woman per annum, and we will put it in their reviews? So you can start doing like very specific asks that are small. Like I don't ask for big things because the big things are like tougher. I ask for things that are in their control and they're incremental.
I was just going to touch on that. There's also a racial bias there too. So not only are women at the upper levels being expected to then bring up everybody else, be the friend, be the mentor, be the sponsor, be the therapist, be everything. If you are a woman of color, if you are a black woman, that burden is even double for you because you are expected to then represent your race at the same time, that men are not under the expectation that they have to represent and speak on behalf of their gender. So black women and women of color get that double burden of having to then look out for every racialized person to help bring them up, where that burden is just not placed on, it's just not placed on white men.
Other questions?
I think we had one over here a minute ago. No? Took it back?
All right, great.
Hi there. My question was something that Gabriella touched on earlier, which is I am one of those people who are associates who had a bad manager and then switched out teams because they were a bad manager. So, like, what are, I guess, some coping strategies that you would recommend for dealing with people who are bad managers if, you know, you're kind of younger and you just need to handle them?
I think one of the things is it's important to have mentors. So I would talk to your mentor network and get advice from them. As a junior person, that's what I did. And then find ways to, basically go back to the manager and understand what is the issue, depending on what the issue is. But I think it's important to network with people and get the answers from them first, as a junior person.
It's usually, you could also try to get support from others. Usually you're working on a team. If there are, I don't know what the nature of the difficulty, if it's attitude or if it's work pressure or timelines or deadlines. If it's related to work specifically, output, it's worth being, honest about it and proactive. And you can very politely say, okay, I can do this if it's like a very short deadline or something, I can do my best to complete that much by today or tomorrow morning, but the rest will come maybe later. You can try to you can say no, I will not do it, but you can also manage the expectations proactively early on, if it's that kind of thing, for example.
We'll take one more. Okay, I guess yes, one more in the back.
Hi. Before I start, I want to say that this is actually very inspirational for me because at the point where I am in my career, everything you're saying is really filtering in, and it's fundamental to where I think we can keep growing. That being said, the confidence muscle, how do you enable yourself to build it on the day-to-day so that when you're faced with those opportunities, you can really leverage on it, considering that sometimes when you need it the most, it's that one time that you get that ask, and you go up for it and you say, look, I am entitled to this promotion for X, Y, and Z, and maybe you, in the back of your head, you've planned this, you've said it 5,000 times in the mirror, you're up at that point, and you just shut down, and then you hear other people talk about it, mainly male, who say, oh, it's easy. You just walk in and you just demand it and they give it to you.
Oh, there's so much there. So twofold is the way you get better at confidence is you have to look at what are you doing on a day-to-day basis to strengthen your confidence. And that is tied to how often you are getting out of your comfort zone versus how often you stay in your comfort zone. So what are you doing on a regular basis to push yourself into that uncomfortable zone? And that could be minor things to taking, I don't know, a salsa dancing class at the gym and you've got 2 left feet, right? To going to a networking event by yourself. To some women don't like going to the movies by themselves or going out for dinner by themselves, just like those small little things. But it's the women from my study are showing time and time again, the ones that are able to switch it in that moment are doing things on a regular basis to strengthen their confidence, and then simultaneously it is being aware of that negative voice, that negative self-talk that can happen instantly. And that can set you on a spiral for imposter syndrome and self-doubt, and all of a sudden you're planting doubt where there was no doubt to begin with in your mind. And being aware of negative self-talk is so important, because we know that the number one thing that helps us is self-compassion, self-kindness instead of self-judgment. There is not one study that shows negative self-talk is useful. But yet we shit-talk ourselves all the time, right? When you fail at something, think immediately, what are the thoughts in your mind? Yes, and sadly, I do this exercise all the time in my workshops. When you fail, what are the very first things that you're saying to yourself? And it's not like, oh my gosh, you're amazing, keep going, right? No, oftentimes it's like, oh my gosh, I'm such an idiot. Oh my God, I'm a failure. I knew I could do it. I'm a loser, I'm stupid. It's all of those phrases that then, it's like layering a memory. And then the next time you fail, you automatically recall those negative words, and then all of a sudden you're on a cycle. So it's being aware, and it takes practice, to as soon as those negative words come, and you have to rephrase it. What did I learn? What's the benefit of this failure? And then moving forward. It's a longer process.
So I think that's a super important point. Emotional resilience is very important. I think that's the number one thing you build. The number 2 thing I would do, and I actually do, is you need to break down the problem. Figure out in which situations you are not confident and why. So I have someone on my team, male, white, Jewish, who said to me, I have to wear a Superman outfit to feel good in meetings and feel confident. So if it's about presence, do that. I have to say, like, I had a woman who gave me advice on the trading floor and said, Gabriella, you never wear a jacket and you never look senior. You're always wearing little cardigans and you look like a little girl running around the trading floor. Stop running on the trading floor and wear a jacket. I don't think I've ever went to work without a jacket since. So it can be small things like that, but it can be bigger things like you don't have the confidence to speak in front of 5 people, in front of like one senior person. You are not confident bossing around 11 junior colleagues, right? So you need to break down the problem and work on things. If it's speaking to senior people, just like practice. I practice. If it's about telling people what to do, practice with a friend and say, I need to tell 11 people what to do and I feel uncomfortable. So I think you need to actually break down the problem and work on the solutions to practice.
I think that's time for us, so thank you all for joining us this morning. Thank you to our panelists, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.
So thank you to all the panelists. I just remind everyone that we have about a half-hour break right now. Feel free to leave your things here at the tables. The restrooms are downstairs and upstairs. We'll reconvene in 30 minutes. Thank you.
Within companies, more women in senior leadership positions leads to higher returns, lower risk, lower volatility, more client focus.
In life is not only to be a businesswoman and etc., but really to show that it's possible to break the glass ceiling that many of us believe.
We talked about building relationships, networking, taking on more risk, properly going through your career with mentorship and sponsorship.
Es evidente que la diversidad es un elemento básico, que no puede haber solamente hombres, no puede haber solamente hombres de un mismo tipo, no puede haber solo personas de una sola procedencia. La diversidad, y donde incluimos a las mujeres sin duda, es un elemento central.
Things that I find in working with women that are in leadership positions is, number one, they're awesome leaders in the truest sense of the word. They're very inclusive. They're great listeners.
Right now, actually, I report to a woman. She's responsible for the 62% of the entire company.
If I see a panel of candidates for an interview and there are no women in it, I will say, have we really gone out and had outreach to see if they're women?
I think many times people feel like they're alone in their situation that they're going through. But to hear from another woman, look, I've been there. Let me tell you about that one time that I went through this. I mean, it's like, it gives you a whole new perspective and it puts things into perspective.
If women don't make the decision to stay in the workforce now, they will not become CEOs of major indigenous companies. They will not become senators and congresswomen. They will not become leading lawyers. They will not become presidents.
It's the diversity in the experience that I think is unique to the format that we have. And I hope we continue expanding and bringing women to the forefront.